from the heart of the Shire, through the depths of Moria, to the ends of Middle-earth. It's the Babylon Bee reads The Lord of the Rings. With your hosts, Kyle Mann and Dan Coates.
Old Tom Bombadil is a merry fellow. Bright blue his jacket is, and his boots are yellow.
That's awesome.
Huh?
Where's the whole get up?
I didn't.
We
do
missed
the
it.
get-up.
That's
We
how
We're
missed
going to do
it.
that in After Effects. We're going to put it
Photo here.
on
I'll just
in, yeah.
hold really still. Got it? Okay, now we're going to put the hat and the coat. Guys, welcome to the Babylon Bee Reads. We are reading Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring. We are in Chapter 7 in the House of Tom Bombadil. This is the Tom Bombadil special.
Woo!
The Tom Bombadil is awesome show.
The Tom Bombadil is awesome. That's what we're going to rename the whole podcast. Tom Bombadil is awesome. I'm Kyle Mann. This is Dan Coates. And this is Jonathan Watson. He runs a website called theonering.com. If you want to check it out, it has a lot of information on the books, and it craps all over the movies. So...
I'll take it, sure. Occasionally we do.
All right, so we're at this part in the story now. We finally run into Tom Bombadil in the Old Forest. The hobbits have left the Shire officially when they left Crick Hollow, and they go through this hedge into the forest. And we're in the Old Forest. The old willow tree tries to curb stomp Frodo into the water and swallow up the other two hobbits, and Sam's running around, trying to light the tree on fire with Frodo. And then they hear this little merry guy skipping along the way, and he starts beating the tree with a stick to get the hobbits out. How'd I do?
That's perfect.
Yep.
And we ended at the last chapter where they go into Tom Bombadil's house to see the lights coming from this place, and they hear a voice singing, and they walk in.
Yep. And they step on the threshold of the door, and they are covered in light.
And they are
arrived in the House of Tom Bombadil, Chapter 7.
So here we are. So we established Tom Bombadil as this character whose presence kind of represents a safe haven, both in his protection over this strange and mysterious ancient old forest, and in his house seems to be this kind of place of refuge. Goldberry, we meet Goldberry, who seems to be Tom Bombadil's wife, and she introduces herself as the daughter of the river, and she closes the door and says, "Let us shut out the night, for you are still afraid, perhaps, of mist and tree shadows and deep water and untamed things. Fear nothing, for tonight you are under the roof of Tom Bombadil." This is kind of how Tolkien introduces us into this concept that now we're in a safe house. We're fine. For a chapter, you're going to be okay.
Yeah, I like his approach of how we were in such dire straits for the entire length of the entire chapter, and now we can just breathe a sigh of release of understand, like, okay, now we can just relax and understand maybe what's been going on and take a little step back. Although the very first thing is there's still, we don't know who these characters are, so maybe there's still a little bit of tension in that, even where Frodo says to her, "Fair Lady Goldberry," Goldberry said Frodo at last.
Maybe she's Jewish.
Said Frodo at last, feeling his heart moved with a joy that he did not understand. And so the mystery of them, the enigma, is still there, and we don't know any of that. And that's one of the things that's great about this chapter is
the enigma is still there.
Yeah.
There's very few entries that you can pull up on like a Lord of the Rings wiki, and they're like, we don't know anything about this guy.
Yeah, right.
And Tom Bombadil is almost one of those things. I mean, there's a lot of information on Tom Bombadil, but at the end, you read any article or entry on Tom Bombadil, and it's like, honestly, nobody really knows.
No, yeah. But there are so many articles of people there who are trying to figure it out still right now. 70 years later.
It's just a great point of discussion, which I think that alone justifies him as a great character. I mean, anything you're still talking about, and it's hotly debated decades later, I mean, that's great.
Yeah.
We actually reveal what the true answer is in the subscriber portion.
Yeah, so if you subscribe,
we figured it out.
Yeah, we figured it out, and you got to subscribe to figure it out with us.
Although we do actually have a lot of interesting subscriber comments and theories on who Tom Bombadil is, and we have some comments from Tolkien himself that you pulled up
on exactly who he thought Tom Bombadil was.
So that'll be interesting.
In answer
to the subscriber portion.
Yeah. One of my favorite lines, right in here in the beginning, where Goldberry and or Frodo talks to Goldberry. is where he says, the spell that was now laid upon him was different. Less keen and lofty was the delight, but deeper and nearer to mortal heart, marvelous and not strange, which is an interesting statement because it's his mortal heart. It's not right, means not elvish. And so something about them touches him more deeply than even the elves, I think. I think that's what Tolkien was trying to say. I'm not exactly sure, but that was a statement I'd never really noticed before. But something about Goldberry was so, I don't know, it thrust into him so deeply. And maybe that's because she's this earthen figure, right? A representation of, not a representation, but someone who's in touch with the earth. I mean, she's the daughter of the river. He says, now the joy that was hidden in the songs we heard is made plain to me. And that goes back to the songs being the things that created the earth, and the song is so important. And it touches Frodo so deeply, just her singing and her being with him. And he breaks out in a song. O slender as a willow wand, O clearer than clear water, O reed by the living pool, fair river daughter. O springtime and summertime and spring again after, O wind on the waterfall that and the leaves laughter. And it just springs out of him, and he didn't know what overcame him. And it's funny that just her presence brings that out of him, right? This serendipity of song and joy.
You can try that as a pickup technique at bars.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
No. You just see a girl and you just start
oh,
singing. Slender as a willow wand. I don't think that has the same effect nowadays as it might have during the age of Middle Earth.
Did it ever?
I thought you would say the 90s.
No, it's not. But Middle Earth, during this period that actually happened.
Well, okay. At this moment. Okay.
In Earth's history.
In the third age.
Yes.
The tail end.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Goldberry says the trees and the grasses and all things growing or living in the land belong each to themselves. Mm-hmm. Tom Bombadil is the master. No one has ever caught old Tom walking in the forest, wading in the water, leaping on the hilltops under light and shadow. He has no fear. Tom Bombadil is master. Yeah. So we get this, he's almost like, in this domain at least, he's almost like omnipotent in some way. I mean, I don't know if omnipotent's the right word, but definitely close to all-powerful over this domain, which is interesting.
Yeah, she says he is the master of wood, water, and hill. And then she goes on to say, well, Frodo goes on to ask, oh, he owns everything? Yeah. And she goes, oh, no, that would be too much of a burden. Yeah. So it's like this weird thing where like he's just like a part of it. But like, it's just kind of interesting. Like he doesn't own it. He's not responsible for it, but he's the master somehow.
Imagine no possessions.
The good shepherd. Well, I don't know. Yeah. That might be a little too much. And right before that, Frodo asks her, who is Tom Bombadil? And she says, he is. And Frodo looked at her and questioned me. He is, as you have seen him, she said in answer to his look. He's the master of wood, water, and hill, right? The he is, I don't think Tolkien meant like he is, like biblically speaking, he is, right?
Yeah.
The I am, he is, right? But just he is Tom Bombadil. What do you want me to say? He's the guy who's he leaps from, from hill to hill, so to speak. It's hard to understand. I mean, this is where we get into the depths of what is Tom Bombadil, and that's what the point is. Like, he didn't ask what is Tom Bombadil. He asked who is Tom Bombadil. Well, Tom Bombadil is Tom Bombadil. It's like saying.
I think it's interesting that Tom Bombadil seems to be operating like on a different level. Like when he first rescues him from Old Man Willow, and then he just books it and runs ahead of him, just leaves him behind. He's like, "Oh, don't worry, you guys will make it to my house eventually."
Yeah.
And then they get to the house, and he's like, "Oh, is the table ready? Okay, great, let's eat." And then Goldberry's like, "Well, your guests are not ready." And he's like, "Oh,
right,
I forgot. You guys need to, So he takes him back to the guest room. There's the bed. There's all the slippers laid out already. There's the hot and cold water so they can wash and do whatever they need to do. It's like everything's all. So that's one of the things I wanted to kind of talk about in this chapter. That's super weird to me, that everything is just ready and waiting for them. And then I think he says later on in the chapter, like, I've been expecting you. And there's elements of that where it's like that's kind of creepy and weird to me, or mystical, I guess.
Yeah, if you go into a hobo's house in the forest and he's got beds lying out for each one of you.
Yeah, like he's got matching slipper, like 4 sets of Hobbit-sized slippers ready to go.
That's when you want to call the police.
But isn't it kind of like, it's like going to grandma's house, right? Nobody ever stays there, but when you get there, she's always completely ready. Yeah. And that's what it feels like to me.
Well, he even says, "Did I hear you calling?" "No, I was too busy singing." And he says, "Just chance brought me then. If chance you call it, it was no plan of mine, though I was waiting for you."
Yeah.
We heard news of you and learned that you were wandering. So he knows about them. He knows they're going on this journey. He had heard about Bilbo and Frodo and all this. And he's just like, well, it was just chance that I happened to be there at that moment. If you want to call it chance.
Dun, dun, dun. Yeah. Does that answer your question, Dan?
Is that like where Tom Bombadil breaks the fourth wall and stares at the camera?
It's like, if you want to call
that chance.
He winks.
Winks at you. Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And then all hobbits are like, who the heck are you talking about? By that pool long ago, I found the river daughter, fair young Goldberry, sitting in the rushes. Sweet was her singing then, and her heart was beating. So he like found her at the withy window or whatever it is.
Yeah.
He just found her sitting there. He's like, oh, I guess you'll be my wife, you know?
Yeah, there's, that goes back to the poem that Tolkien had written in the early 30s, I think it was, about Bombadil, where Bombadil is on an adventure and he gets pulled down into the water kind of playfully by the river daughter, and then, he ends up like marrying her after like she toys with him a little bit. And one of the commenters actually had a really quick overview of the whole story of Tom Bombadil, but it's like the story of Tom Bombadil seems a little, it's different than what we were used to in the Lord of the Rings, but there's the history to it still that Tolkien had still written, and so he inserted him with that history already in mind when he wrote who Goldberry was and how she and what their relationship was already established to be. Yeah.
This is a little out of the box for my little fan theory here, but I wonder if one of the things that inspired Tolkien to make Tom Bombadil this almost eternal, immortal character, the firstborn, he's like the one who's there when it's created and he's there throughout. I wonder if just because this is based on this childhood toy, that it kind of represents this thing from childhood. And Tom Bombadil being written so early in the progression of Tolkien's Middle-earth, how he's actually writing and crafting these stories. Tom Bombadil being, it's almost a meta element where the reason that Tom Bombadil is from the beginning is because he was from the beginning, in terms of him writing the story. He's built a lot of this around this guy. And the story grew so much into this big epic myth of Middle Earth, mythology of Earth, and Tom Bombadil is just still, this toy is just still sitting in the forest, in some way. It's really interesting if you think about the way that he crafted the narrative feeds into how Tom Bombadil sits in this timeline. Yeah. Or am I just high?
I don't know. Like I hate trying to say like this, like coming in like. Making myself come to a point on what Tom Bombadil is or who he was. And the way I kind of look at it is, in the history and the cosmology of Middle-earth, all the Ainur sing the earth into existence, right? Yeah. And it's kind of like, the way I look at it is like, he's like a beautiful stanza that becomes part of the earth, right? Yeah, it's like that sort of thing. But trying to understand what that's supposed to be is sort of a fool's errand, right? We're never going to get there, but...
Well, I almost feel like a less fanciful, more disciplined author would have cut Tom Bombadil. Somebody who is like trying to craft this tight narrative. Yeah. And any editor that read this book would have been like, we need to cut the Bombadil. He doesn't fit the tone. He doesn't fit the style. I think for Tolkien, Bombadil is central to Middle-earth. He's there because he was there since he's been creating this world.
Right. Right, and he sits outside the bounds of good and evil and the battles that are there, and he's a representation of the basics of Middle-earth, right? He's part of that song. Yeah. And he doesn't get affected by the ring. He asks Frodo for the ring, and Frodo's like, "Oh, sure." Like he brings it out, and he's like, "I guess." And then he sees it grow in his hand, and Tom Bombadil is just laughing at it. And he's like, "Huh, look at this little trifle." And then he sticks it on, and everyone realizes, "Oh, wait, he's not gone." And so he's not more powerful. He's other powerful, right? It's just like the things of the good and evil that the Ainur have been fighting against, and the Maiar and all that sort of stuff. It doesn't matter to him as much, just because he's there to enjoy the world. Yeah. Right. Yeah, like, he's sort of like the massive hobbit, right? It's like if you could if a hobbit could have sort of a control over his own life, this is like he'd be singing, he'd be enjoying the food, he'd be enjoying the land.
To me, in a lot of ways, he represents the good. He's the good that is outside of and above all these conflicts that are coming and going.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
And that's one major theme that I wanted to talk about with Tom Bombadil is that I think this is good for us just in an application sense today, is that we get really caught up in our little political battles, even serious ones. We can really look at all the things that are going on in the world, and we can be like, this is bad, whatever the political thing is that's going on in our age. It's like, this is a real challenge, and we need to find a way to fight this battle. But Tolkien wants us to pull back and remember that there is this good that is going to be there, regardless, and that there may be darkness for 100 years, there may be darkness for 200 years, but it'll fade away, it'll go away, and the good will still be there. The world is, as Chesterton says, the world is originally good, not just ultimately good. It's not just going to a good place, it started as a good thing.
G.K. Chesterton.
Yeah, people act like if their political campaign or party or tribe or what they're going to call it, people act like that is ultimate, that if we don't win, good will go away. And I think for Tolkien and for people that are in Christ, it's like good's eternal. You can't make it go away. It's always going to be there. And I think that's kind of what Tom Bombadil represents to me.
Absolutely. And I think that's a constant theme through the books. You get in Return of the King where Sam is looking up and he sees the star through the shadow, through the clouds. Yeah. And he remembers that there's light and high beauty forever beyond the reach of the shadow. I think that's an important lesson for us. For Tolkien, it wasn't good and evil are in this perpetual struggle. It was good. The world is good and things are good, and evil is this twisting that's trying to take it over, but really has no chance ultimately.
Long term. Yeah.
It's not the yin and the yang. They're two equal forces. It's like, no, good is above and beyond everything.
Yeah. Absolutely.
The smallest good can win out over the greatest evil in the long run. And that good will endure. Yeah.
So I want to read, this is my favorite passage in Lord of the Rings.
The entire book.
This is my favorite passage in Tom Bombadil.
Sit back, relax.
Now this will be the first of many times I say this probably. But Tom Bombadil is explaining the forest to them.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is Tolkien doesn't actually do like the long expositional quote from Tom Bombadil. He just kind of relays, he just kind of summarizes what Bombadil is saying. And then at the end, it kind of says that they don't know if they've been sitting there for hours or days, as Bombadil has been kind of almost implanting this imagery in their minds. And he's going on, and he just goes on and on about the forest. And then he starts talking about the Barrow Downs that are nearby. And I think Tolkien's kind of almost extrapolating this beyond the Barrow Downs and just saying that of all these kingdoms that are rising and falling around the old forest. And I just love just this theme that we're talking about, that he's like, the old forest is still there, the good things are still there. Bad guys are taking over, and then kings are coming in and conquering them, and then the kings are dying, and then civilization's fading away and then being built again. And Tom Bombadil's just sitting there singing and collecting flowers. And so it says, suddenly Tom's talk left the woods and went leaping up the young stream, over bubbling waterfalls, over pebbles and worn rocks, and among small flowers and close grass and wet crannies, wandering at last up onto the downs. They heard of the great barrows and the green mounds and the stone rings upon the hills and in the hollows among the hills. Sheep were bleating in flocks. Green walls and white walls rose. There were fortresses on the heights. Kings of little kingdoms fought together, and the young sun shone like fire on the red metal of their new and greedy swords. There was victory and defeat, and towers fell. Fortresses were burned, and flames went up into the sky. Gold was piled on the biers of dead kings and queens, and mounds covered them, and the stone doors were shut, and the grass grew over all. Sheep walked for a while, biting the grass, but soon the hills were empty again. A shadow came out of dark places far away, and the bones were stirred in the mounds. Barrow wights walked in the hollow places with a clink of rings on cold fingers, and gold chains in the wind. Stone rings grinned out of the ground like broken teeth in the moonlight. Like, what a masterful passage. I mean, you just get this image of these, almost if you're watching a movie and they just did the time lapse of the things being built and then the kings coming and fighting and the grass growing over it and the sheep come and then they're gone and then these ghosts move in and you're just like, I mean, and for me, that's just such a thematic passage with what we're talking about, that Bombadil doesn't seem to care, as we've seen with The Ring, he doesn't seem to care about the current struggle so much because he's been there and he knows the shadow's going to...
He's seen it come and go the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful the way he writes that the kings of little kingdoms fought together. Little kingdoms, right?
Yeah.
And it's going through the Silmarillion. There are no little kingdoms, right? But Bombadil's perspective is like, oh, these guys, they're gonna be gone soon enough. The young sun shone like fire on the red metal of their new and greedy swords.
Yeah.
Like, oh man.
The young sun. So we're talking thousands of years of this that he's seen.
Yeah.
He's seen the kings will come and go. It's kind of his commentary there.
Trump will go, Biden will come.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Well, absolutely. And we did see that. We did see that with the media, where every little thing with Trump was, wherever you land politically, every little thing with Trump was like, this is the end of democracy. And Tom Bombadil would be like dancing, like, oh, whatever.
He'd just be living life. He'd be enjoying life and picking water lilies for Goldberry. And
it's the same thing that conservatives probably are tempted to do now with Biden. Is every time he signs, here he is, 3,000th executive order of the day. And everybody going like, oh, this is it. This is the end of democracy. And Bombadil's like, do 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 do, dancing around.
This is why we need more Tolkien.
This is why we need more Tolkien in our lives. So another interesting thing about this passage is now Tolkien is using this safe house and this kind of not fatherly, but guardian character as he's using him in a narrative sense to foreshadow what's coming up with the Barrow Downs. And he does do this again in Rivendell and in Lothlorien, of foreshadowing what's to come. Whatever you guys do, don't go up on those hills there. If you see you're in the hills, you're in trouble. So now as the reader, you're looking out for that in the next chapter.
Yeah. Going back to that kind of that eternal perspective of Tom Bombadil, how he's just joyful and laughter and nonsense while the whole world's fighting and, good and evil's duking it out. Do you guys think that Tom Bombadil is right?
Yeah, that's an interesting question.
There's a lot of criticism about like, oh, well, he was just, looking at stuff in our recent past, like with the Nazis. Or,
right.
Yeah,
what would Bombadil have done with the Nazis? Would Bombadil have killed baby Hitler? Gone back in time and murdered baby?
I know like us as Tolkienites, we're inclined to look at Tom Bombadil in a positive way, but maybe somebody's reading this and they go like, well, you can't be like that. You gotta do things in the world and take action. And
and didn't we pull up a quote from earlier in the book? I think to contrast with, there's that famous quote about you can't fence the world out forever.
Yeah. Yes. Right.
And it's very different with the Old Forest, where he is kind of, in some sense, doing that.
I think Bombadil is sort of like utopia in a way, right? If this is the way we could have it, then that's the way it is. But it's not real, right? We still have to fight. We still have to do the right things. But it doesn't mean that, Bombadil sees the things and he never lost hope in a sense, right? He never lost his ability to enjoy life. It's sort of, you fight with the hope of the future, but with the knowledge of the present in a way.
Well, he's also not an avatar for us. He's
exactly.
Not a protagonist.
That's a good way of putting it.
He represents something more eternal.
Yeah. He's not affected by the ring. We are, and so we live in
we're on a different
plane
level.
or a different reality, or like our. I hate using the word fate again, but our fate is going to be different than his because we're a different part of that song, right?
Yeah,
he has a different. His role is different in the song of the cosmology of Middle Earth than the other characters, even the elves.
Yeah. Some people are called to throw the ring in the cracks of doom. Crack of doom.
Some people are called to pick water lilies.
Some people are called to dance around the forest.
So I wonder if Tolkien, in a way, is kind of saying like, okay, for the people that their part of the song is to do the fighting and to go through life and go through all the hard stuff that Tom's not. He's just on a different level. I wonder if we're still supposed to learn something from Tom that
I think so. Yeah.
Even though we're fighting and we're going through all these hard things in life, all these difficulties and hardships, that we're still supposed to have, or we're still supposed to look to like an eternal perspective that he's joyful and he's happy, and that we somehow, even though we might not see how, we're still supposed to be in some ways as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Disagree. I disagree.
Yeah.
No.
That's how we get the views of it. You're wrong. Yeah.
I concur.
Cable news.
I definitely concur. That. Yeah. Because like he was saying, in some ways he's the ultimate perfection of what the hobbits would be if they could. And so, like, in times of peace, this is what you should be doing. But that ideal always exists, you know. The good always exists. It's always there, and you know we believe that for our world, the good is there. The eternal truths are there.
And you notice Tom Bombadil didn't say to the hobbits, "Come on, stay with me, live with me in my life." And he's like, "No, you got to go tomorrow. You guys
got to go."
Right?
Yeah. He's like helping them. He gives them the song to help them out of a jam. He knows that they have to do something. He does help them through that.
Right.
But he also knows what his place is, and it's not outside the old forest. This is what he's been called to.
So maybe we need to be like happy warriors, whether that's
happy warriors,
whether that's in the culture or politically, or like I know people get really wrapped up into stuff, current events. It's like you need to be happy. You can't just fight and be bitter and angry
And I think also to be constantly, you know, what is Tom Bombadil doing? He's tending his land. You know, he's going around managing this forest and enjoying it.
He's cleaning his room.
He's got
making his bed, petting a cat.
You gotta clean your.
Exactly. I like a lot of those 12 rules. I think Tom Bombadil is doing that. Yeah.
Listen up, Frodo. You gotta clean your room.
You gotta clean up, Bucko. You gotta shape up.
Put that ring on. It's not good.
It's not good.
Yeah, but I think Tolkien would agree that, like, well, I'm going to say what Tolkien would agree with, but I think that we were reading that Chesterton deal about conservatives painting the post.
Yeah.
You know, that
keeping it.
Yeah, like we're not.
Yeah, conservatism isn't just the post is there and the white paint's fading. And you're like, that post has to stay there because we're conservatives, but conservatism is actually repainting the post over and over and over and maintaining its
working for it.
You're keeping it, you're maintaining it.
So I think he's calling us to an active defense of the good things, not just reactionary, like you know, something bad's happening, I guess we'll go put that fire out, you know, but defending the good things of the Shire and the old forest. Well, that's probably a good stopping point to break into our subscriber portion. But first, let's summarize where we're heading next. So there's a couple of dreams. Maybe we'll talk about some in the subscriber portion that have some dreams in the... which are interesting. They have scary dreams, and like Tom Bombadil comes and pokes them and says, hey, calm down.
Except for Sam.
Except for Sam, which I thought was interesting. We'll talk about that a little bit, perhaps. So they sleep one more time, and then in the next chapter, they're going to be departing Tom Bombadil's house and absolutely not going to the Barrow Downs, whatever they do.
Whatever you do,
don't go there.
And if you don't go there, here's the song you need just in case.
Yeah, just in case, there's a song that you have. So hopefully we have defended Tom Bombadil, and you guys now absolutely love him and think he's the best character in
I do think
Lord
he's essential.
I think so too, yeah.
He is essential.
Yeah.
So perhaps we'll talk in the subscriber portion a little bit about Peter Jackson's decision to cut him out of the movie and our thoughts on that. And we have some interesting behind-the-scenes stuff from Tolkien, his comments on Bombadil. And we have a lot of subscriber comments to go through because people were passionate about Tom Bombadil.
It could be a while.
So let's do it.
John kept hitting refresh to read all your new comments. And
he was arguing with all of you.
He is not Eru.
Absolutely flaming everyone.
Gandalf's brother.
All right, let's break into the Babylon Bee pub.
Sweet.
In pub.
Find out who Tom Bombadil really is.
Here we go.
Coming up next for Babylon Bee subscribers.
In this sense, I think he represents something more than just being a straight up allegory.
Yeah, I think when we use the term allegory, we think of it in terms of Animal Farm.
Yeah,
or we're like, this horse represents this Russian general. And it does feel like he built Middle Earth around this guy.
I've never seen Tom Bombadil and Ethan in the same room at the same time.
It's true.
I'm just saying.
And sometimes diving down deeply into that, we kind of go down paths we might not see. I think the official term would be eisegeting yourself into the story, saying like, oh, I think he meant this here, and I think he meant this here, when we have what Tolkien actually said.
We've solved it. Tom Bombadil is Aslan.
Kyle and Dan would like to thank Seth and Dan Dillon for buying us cool swords and paying the bills, Adam Ford for creating our jobs, Ethan Nicole for creative direction, and all the writers at the Babylon Bee, Matthew McDavid for guiding studio operations, Patrick Green for show production, Caitlin Petty for laugh tracks, the Babylon Bee subscribers who make what we do possible, and you, the listener. Until next time, This is Austin Robertson, the voice of the Babylon Bee reads The Lord of the Rings, reminding you, a day may come when the courage of men fails, but it is not this day. To watch or listen to the rest of the show, become a Babylon Bee subscriber at babylonbee.com/plans.